Hey everyone, so today in our lesson we're going to be looking at more geometric figures. Our learning targets for this lesson are we're going to be trying to describe angles and angle pairs and be able to identify and name parts of circles. So first activity we're going to do here is I want you to just draw 4 angles with different characteristics. Okay, so think about what you know about angles, draw 4 angles with different characteristics, and then describe each angle and name the angles using both numbers and letters. So take some time, go ahead and pause the video and draw those angles and describe them and name them with numbers and letters, and then we'll go over it and see what the answers might look like. Alright, so right here are some angles you could have drawn. These are just some examples. Your answers don't have to look exactly like this, but in general, if you're naming 4 angles with different characteristics, 4 types of angles that would be good to have that are different would be an acute angle, a right angle, an obtuse angle, and a straight angle. And you can see for each one of these I labeled it with letters and with numbers. So this angle would be named angle ABC or CBA. You could also call it angle 1. This would be angle DEF or angle FED, and it's also angle 2. This is angle MNO or ONM, and angle 3, and this is angle XYZ or ZYX, and it's also angle 4 if you're labeling it by number. So those are some examples of angles you could have put. There's a lot of other ones out there, a ton, but to get 4 different kinds, really an acute, a right, an obtuse, and a straight angle would be the best way to do 4 different angles. Alright, so on the second problem, I want you to go and compare and contrast these angles for A, B, C, and D. Again, when you compare and contrast, that's where you're going to describe how they're alike or how they're different. So just as many different ways as you can think of that these angles are the same or how they're different or the relationship between the angles. So go ahead and pause the video for a few seconds and try to compare and contrast the angles for A, B, C, and D. Ready? Go. Alright, so here's some answers that you could have put. You may have put extra things other than what's here, and that's fine. But some of the main things to notice is that angle 1 and 2 are supplementary. That's the relationship between those 2 angles. Also, it's important to notice that they're adjacent angles. That means they share this side and they share their vertex. Angle 1 has a vertex right here, and angle 2 also has a vertex right here. So they share a vertex and a side, which makes them adjacent. Also, something that's different is that angle 1 is acute, but angle 2 is obtuse. So that's a difference in the 2 angles. Over here for part B, angle ABD and angle BDC are complementary, which means they add up to be 90. You can tell that because there's a 90-degree box right here. So angle ADB and BDC together form 90 degrees, so they're complementary. And they're also adjacent to each other. You could also notice that one way they're similar is that they're both acute angles, which means they're both less than 90. So that's another similarity between the 2 angles. Part C. Angle DEF and RST are also complementary because they add up to 90. While they aren't adjacent, they are still complementary because they will still add up to give you 90 degrees. And notice it says they are not adjacent, so that's one thing to pay attention to. Again, you could also say they're both acute, which is a similarity. And part D, you got a 30-degree angle and 150, so these 2 are supplementary because they will add up to be 180. So you could say that the 2 angles are supplementary and they also are not adjacent. You might notice that a difference is that one is acute while the other is obtuse. So moving on to part 3, it says recall that the sum of the measures of complementary is 90 and supplementary is 180, as we just talked about. So this figure right here shows 2 intersecting lines. Name 2 angles that are supplementary to angle 4. Remember, supplementary means they add up to equal 180. So go ahead and pause the video and give some time on that. And if you want to go ahead and also figure out this part B, explain why those angles must have the same measure. So give that some thought and then unpause the video and see the answer to the question. So the answer to part A is that angle 3 and angle 5 are both supplementary to angle 4. And the way you can tell is because angle 3 and angle 4 form a straight line. Okay, a straight line we know is 180 degrees, so if the measure of angle 3 combined with angle 4 makes a straight line, then the 2 angles together have to add up to 180 and they're supplementary. On the other side, okay, angle 4 and angle 5 also form a straight line. It's a different straight line, but they still form a straight line. So that means angle 4 and angle 5 together form a straight line, which means they're supplementary also. So angles 3 and 5 are the ones that are supplementary with angle 4. The reason, what says part B, so part B says explain why the angles you named in part A must have the same measure. So if angle 3 is supplementary with angle 4, that means that 3 plus 4 equals 180. Angle 3 plus angle 4 has to equal 180. Okay, but we said also that angle 5 and angle 4 are supplementary. So that means angle 5 plus angle 4 has to equal 180, right? So in this situation, you can see that angles 3 and 5, they are both adding to angle 4 to equal 180. So if they both add to angle 4 to equal 180, then they have to be the exact same measure, right? Which is what the amateur is kind of explaining right there. All right, so let's move on. So in this chart, I want you to complete this chart by naming all of the acute angles for the numbered figure in this column and all of the acute angles for the lettered figure in this box right here. And then do the same thing for obtuse angles, same thing for each of these. Name as many as you can, all right? This column on the left is going to be for the numbered figure, and the column on the right is going to be for the lettered figure. So go ahead and pause the video and give that a try. Again, name as many of them as you possibly can. So for the numbered figure, the only acute angles that we have are angles 8 and angle 9. Those are both acute because they're less than 90. Okay, for the numbered figure, but the obtuse angles, angle 7 and angle 10 are obtuse. They're both bigger than 90. Okay, angles that have the same measure. So similar to the problem we just did a second ago, where we saw that angles 3 and 5 have to both be the same measure because they were both supplementary to angle 4 in the last figure we looked at. For the same reason right here, angle 8 and angle 9 have to be the same as each other. I put one arc mark right here and one arc mark right here to indicate that those are the same measure. So because they're supplementary with angle 7, angle 8 and 7 make a straight line, and angle 9 and 7 make a straight line, that means angle 8 and 9 have to be the same. They're the same measure. And for the same reason, angle 7 has to be the same as angle 10. So those are angles with the same measure also. Okay, which angles are supplementary? Well, we just talked about it a little bit. We've got angle 8 and 7 are supplementary because they form this straight line. Then you've got angle 7 and 9 that are supplementary because they form this straight line. And then angle 9 and 10 are supplementary because they form this straight line. And angle 8 and 10 are supplementary because they form that straight line. So you've got all of those pairs of supplementary angles. How many of those angles are complementary, meaning form a 90-degree angle or add up to 90? None of them. Okay, there's no two angles in there that we know add up to be 90 degrees. For the lettered figure, a little bit more complicated, but you can see your acute angles are angle ABF, angle CBD, and then angle EBD. So those three angles are all acute. They're all less than 90 degrees. Your obtuse angles might be a little bit tougher to see because some of them are hidden. But you've got angle FBC, right? So that's kind of strange having to go to the middle of an angle. Angle ABD, so this is in a different color. ABD, that's obtuse. And you've also got angle EBF. Okay, so there's your three obtuse angles in this figure. Then angles with the same measure, right? You got angle ABF and angle EBD. Those two are the same measure for the same reason that over here angles 9 and 8 were the same measure, because those two angles are both supplementary with angle FBE. If they're both supplementary with angle FBE, then they must be the same measure. Alright, Then you've also got angles ABC and CBE. Those are both the same measure because if this is 90, this one has to be 90 because they make a straight line, which is 180. So if the whole line is 180 and this is 90, 180 minus 90 leaves 90 left over. So those two must be the same measure. And then you've got ABD and FBE because they are two angles that make supplementary angles with angle ABF. And those types of angles we call vertical angles. All right, so it might be a new term for you, but anytime you see two lines that cross, the angles across from each other are the same. They're the same measure. They're congruent, and we call them vertical angles. Okay, the complementary angles. So angles that, supplementary angles. Angles that add up to 180. You got angle ABF and angle EBD. Angle ABD. Because they form this straight line, so they must add up to 180. You've also got angles DBE and ABD because they form a straight line. And you've got angles ABF and EBF because they form the straight line, the straight angle ABE. ABC and CBE because they form the straight line, ABE. And FBC and DBC because they form the straight line, FD. And then you've got FBE and DBE because they form a straight line. So those are all of your supplementary angles. Complementary, there are not too many of these. You've got ABF and CBD. Now that one might be a little bit tricky to see why those are complementary, but if you look at the other pair, it'll make more sense. So let's look at DBE and CBD. DBE and CBD. So these two are complementary because they form this 90-degree angle right here, right? But remember, angle ABF is the same measure as angle DBE because they're vertical angles. So these two are the same, and angle DBE is complementary with CBD. And that means angle ABF has to also be complementary with angle CBD because ABF and DBE are the same measure. So they're the same measure, then whatever one of them is complementary with, the other one is complementary with. Okay, so a lot of angles in there to recognize. Hopefully that makes sense.